Welcome to the Parnassa Podcast, where we deep dive into the financial challenges and opportunities Frum families face today. I'm your host, Eli Fried. Join me as we tackle the Parnassa questions on everyone's minds. How can we, as Frum Yidden living in the United States, make ends meet, build wealth, and live a Torah life with simcha menuchsa nefesh? Whether you're struggling to cover yeshiva tuition, wondering why your hefty income isn't stretching far enough, or looking for practical, savvy ways to help you and others with Parnassa, you've come to the right place. Together, we'll explore money and wealth through the lens of Torah, offering proactive, positive, and practical advice to navigate the unique financial landscape of Frum life. So let's roll. Hello, welcome to the third episode of the Parnassa Podcast. This is Eli Fried, and in today's episode, we'd like to answer a very important and common question that I get. How much money does a Frum family need to live? Now, this is a perfectly understandable question, but really it's a trick question, and there's no one answer that will suffice. Why? Because it depends on so many variables. 100,000 might be enough, or 300,000, or even more than 300,000 might not be enough. Now, in episode 2, we discussed generally why Frum life is so expensive relative to the average American family. The average American family in 2022 had expenditures of $75,000, give or take. And the average Frum family is definitely spending far beyond that. We explained that starting with family size, if the average American household has 2, maybe 3 people in it, even if they have the median number of children, there's four children, there's 4 people in the household. The typical Frum household is going to have 6 people or 10 people or even 15 people. So obviously your expenditures are going to be far higher when you have that many more people. In addition, you have all the kosher Torah-based requirements. So starting with kosher food, I did a quick test, 40% higher. If you're not careful, if you're shopping, it could be far more than that. Tuition, the real red flashing signal, people on average are spending tens of thousands of dollars. You can even have people spending as much on tuition alone as the average American family is spending for all their needs, tashmish kedusha, simchas, etc. And also we focused on the location where the average American is averaging across the entire country, which includes the heartland, it includes the Midwest, and many other parts of the country that are far less expensive than the coastal communities that the vast majority of Frum communities congregate in. That being said, okay, so we get it. Frum life is expensive, but how expensive? Give me a number. I need to shoot for some kind of number of some amount of income that I'm aiming for. Give me some formula. Just give me the norm. What am I aiming for? How much money does the average Frum family need to live? Now, I had a very eye-opening experience very early in my quote-unquote career of Frum finance and being your Gelt guide. I did a training course in budget counseling, specifically aimed at the Frum community. And in that context, I volunteered to budget coach in a very short time period, 3 Frum families, all in Lakewood. And all of them just so happened to have 4 children. They were approximately the same demographic. And the real eye-opener to me was that the amount of income they were earning had nothing to do with how well they were doing financially. So I met the Cohen family, made-up name, but the numbers are accurate. They were grossing $220,000 a year. All 3 couples, husband and wife, were working. And the Cohen family that was grossing $220,000 was $150,000 in debt. And they were headed for their second bankruptcy in 10 years. Clearly, they were not making it despite their $220,000 income, which is a very high household income relative to the average American salary. But I met another family in Lakewood we're calling them the Levy family, also 4 children, also both parents worked. They were grossing about $170,000, $50,000 less than the Cohens. And they were doing it much better than the Cohens, despite earning that much less money. They were short about $1,500 a month, and they had built up because of that, about $10,000 in credit cards. And they were meeting with me to actually try to figure out how they could break even and even start to put away money. They were definitely in far better shape than the Cohen family. Now, at the same time, I then met who I will call the Israel family. They also had 4 children, also lived in Lakewood, also both parents were working, and they were grossing $130,000. And believe it or not only were they paying all their bills, they even had a little bit left over. They just wanted to know how they could plan for their future. As things changed, they had a job offer on the table. They expected their family to grow. So here you have it. 3 families. Over here, the location within the country was not a factor. The family size was not a factor. The fact that they had kosher expenses was not a factor. All 3 of these families had a lot of similarity. And yet, the Cohen family that was earning almost twice as much as the Israel family was heavily, heavily in debt and headed to bankruptcy. The Levy family, which was in the middle, was not that far off of balancing their budget. They were about 10% off. And the Israel family earning the least was doing fine. So we definitely see that when it comes to Parnassa, it's not just about how much you earn. It's about how much you need to spend and how much you choose to spend. And that varies extremely widely. That's something I've seen over and over as I've paid more and more attention over the past years to many, many people across many different communities in the Frum world, and also reading many books focused not just on the Frum community, focused on the general population in America as well. It's called personal finance. It's all personal. And every family, every household, every couple, every person has to make it work for themselves. It's personal. You got to match your income, your expenses, and make it work for you. In the general population, books like The Millionaire Next Door, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, much of what Dave Ramsey writes, etc., focuses on this point, that it's not just what you earn, but how you match your earnings and your spending. There are plenty of doctors, lawyers, Wall Street executives that are earning far beyond the average American, and they are heavily in debt and not making it. And you have regular Joes doing blue collar work who not only are they able to pay their bills, but they can put away money, and over time they can build wealth. So this is a reality of finance, that it is personal, and there's no easy answer. It's because it's personal, because it's variable to such a large extent, there is no easy number you can point to. The Frum world, we need to be all the more attentive to how we match up our personal finance, how we match up our income and our expenses. And it also will vary greatly, even within the Frum community. Some people asking the question, how much do you need to live? Are newlyweds, no children, living in a modest apartment near Beis Meshkova in Lakewood. You have people who have 10 kids that are living in Muncie or Williamsburg. You have people with 4 children living in Teaneck, and everything in between. So the quest for a simple rule of thumb answer, how much money does a Frum family need to make it, does not really make sense. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter. As long as it works for you, then it works for you. So let's go through in a little more depth just to illustrate this point, that unfortunately, there is no one number that makes sense. If you're earning 100, you might be able to make it. If you're earning 300 or 500, you might not be able to make it. You have to make it work for you. You have to select your lifestyle. And sometimes life just throws you realities that also matter. So for example, housing. So obviously which city, which location, the location of your house matters greatly. Also the size of the house. Some people are living in 1,000 square feet apartments or less. Some people are living in 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot homes. What's the quality of the upgrades in the house? What's the style? And that makes a big difference. But even if you have neighbors that are living in identical designed homes, which is not unusual in development, they still can have vastly different bills. When did they buy their homes? Did they buy it when the house was going for 400,000 or 800,000 or 1.2 million. Because of the tremendous volatility in housing prices over the past 10 years, you literally have people that are living next door to each other. One of them bought their home in 2018 for $400,000 and locked in a 3% mortgage, and his next door neighbor bought it three years later and paid $800,000 with a 5% mortgage. And someone who's trying to buy it now will have to pay $1 million and will end up getting a 6-7% mortgage. So it is extremely difficult to come up and say housing is going to cost you this and this number. What about tuition? Some people have 0 people in school. Some people have 2 people. Some families have 2 children in school. Some have 5. Some have 10. The cost of tuition ranges are vast as well. Lakewood has very different pricing than Brooklyn. Brooklyn has very different pricing than Bergenfield. Bergenfield has different pricing than Boca or Los Angeles. Even schools within a city can have very different pricing. Same thing for scholarships. The scholarship offerings, you have Rebbeim that are not paying any tuition because they're sending the children to the school where they teach in, and that is sometimes an included perk. Okay, how about camp? Do you send your children? Do you have children to send to camp? How many children are you sending to camp? Are you sending them for 1 month, for 2 months? Is it sleepaway? Is it day camp? Are you getting tax credits for the day camp? Are you getting scholarships? The cost can vary drastically depending on your selection and your circumstances. Seminary, some people don't send at all. Some people are paying $30,000 full freight. Some people are getting grants and scholarships and are paying $5,000 or $10,000. So how do you come up with a number? Food is one of the most variable costs in the Frum community. How cost conscious are you? You have stores that have no pricing, and they could be priced 50% above what the other stores in the community charge. Some communities, food stores options are limited. Kosher food stores are limited, and very often the pricing there will be greater depending on their volume and other pricing metrics. How much are you shopping in places like Costco, Walmart, Target, Amazon, these places that could save you a ton of money in food? But what are you buying? Are you the type to buy salmon, broccoli, and high-end rice pilaf or something, or maybe buying pre-prepared pasta, or maybe you're serving your family chicken, rice, and zucchini. And that may sound petty to think about $1 this way, $1 that way, but think about it. If you have 5-10 people in your household and you're spending an extra couple dollars on each meal, so you're talking 5,000-10,000 meals being served per year in your family. If each one is costing a couple dollars this way, a couple dollars that way, you're talking a swing of $10,000-$20,000 a year. So what's the right number? Depends on how you live and how you choose to live and how you do live. Cars. Are you driving around 1 clunker, 2 clunkers, 2 solid secondhand cars that you paid cash for? Are you leasing 2 very high-end cars? The costs vary greatly. Vacations, you can do a staycation that costs almost nothing. You could be in high-end jet setter, taking your private jets to Tahiti and spending tens of thousands of dollars at a clip or more. Simchas, some people are going beer budget, and a bar mitzvah is costing them a couple $1,000. Some are spending $50, $100. How many children do you have that you're putting in money for this for Simchas? How lavish are the weddings? How many people are you inviting? Where is it located? Support. Some people are not giving the children anything once they get married. Some people are giving $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month or even $5,000 a month. How many children are you giving support to? Grooming. Are you giving your 5 boys haircuts with that $50, $100 clipper at home, or are you sending them to the barber? Are you bringing them to the barber and paying $20, $30, $40 a head? Clothing. Are you using hand-me-downs? How many children are you buying clothing for? Are you buying on sale? Are you buying one full-priced item and then supplementing the rest with something you're buying on Amazon or Ali or one of these places? Or you just walk into the boutique right before Yontif and every person in the family gets 3 new outfits, 3-4 seasons a year. Costs will vary greatly. One thing I'm going to keep coming back to is taxes. The tax burden on someone earning $100,000 it's a negative tax burden. They're getting money back typically from Uncle Sam, so they can be getting, especially if they have a couple of kids, they could be getting earned income tax credit that's worth 5-10 grand. They may be eligible for various other social assistance that can be worth a lot of money. At the other side of the spectrum, you have yes, someone's earning $300,000-$500,000. Their tax bill could be $50,000-$100,000 or more. So, how much money does a Frum family need to live? $100,000 may be enough, or $300,000, or much more than $300,000 may not be enough. It really depends greatly on the circumstances of your life and the standard of living that you are choosing to live on. So that's the oversight. And again, it may not be such a satisfying answer, but it's an honest answer. Ultimately, you have to make things work for you. So let's talk about some tachlis takeaways. I did promise that the podcast will be a proactive, practical, positive. So let's talk about some tachlis takeaways and some numbers. First of all, everyone needs a budget, because there are people that are earning even $1 million that if you're earning $1 million and spending $2 million, then you end up in debt and then you end up bankrupt. It happens all the time. So everyone needs some kind of financial discipline. The only mathematical equation that I am confident and able to spit out is very simple. Income minus expenses equals savings. So if your income is more than your expenses, then you will have savings. If your income is less than your expenses, then you will end up in debt. That is simple mathematics. Therefore, everyone needs some kind of financial discipline. There are multiple ways to budget. I'm not saying you have to be obsessive about tracking how much is coming and going. Even ashkafically, it's not necessarily the way to go. And there's also some times where you could be penny wise, dollar foolish. If you're running around chasing sales, but you have clients that are ready to pay you $100, $200, $300 an hour or more, then it could be penny wise, dollar foolish for you to be driving across town to save a couple dollars on your groceries. At the same time, you need that needs to be somewhat calculated. There has to be a measurement. The big measurement is the simple one. Your expenses have to be lower than your income, or else you're not going to build wealth. At the same time, your lifestyle will make a huge impact on how much money you need to earn to make ends meet. I had a friend of mine ask me to speak to his wife, because he said his wife is completely not cost conscious. They're earning a lot of money, but they're spending far more than they're earning, because she goes into the grocery, that's the most convenient for her, which is fine. But then she'll go and choose the most expensive items without any discipline, without any thought. So again, it's one thing if you do that once in a while, but if you do it all the time, if you're paying $7 a pound for pasta, potatoes that the store prepared, whereas you could, if you made it at home, it would cost you $1 a pound. You're literally paying, 7 times the price for the exact same outcome. If you do that over time, it's going to be very, very expensive. Again, maybe it's worth it to you. Maybe you're earning so much money and you hate cooking, and that's fine. But the way you run your life matters. And just like we saw with those 3 families, even though they had the same number of children, they were living in the same town, and they had the same kosher obligations, but you had the one earning $220,000 that was going bankrupt, and you had the one earning $130,000 that was doing fine. So you need some kind of measurement, and how you live is going to make a big difference. A lot of that is influenced by your social circle. If you live among people that are spending very heavily, without, and seemingly without a care as to how economical things are, and they have all the money in the world, it seems, it's going to influence you. It's very difficult to live far beneath your social circle. So that's something you need to pay attention to. And another thing I want to highlight is that everything is a trade-off. Again, my point is not that you should live frugally, or that you have to live a certain way. Again, it's personal to you. To you, it may be very, very important and useful to live in a big, large, airy, comfortable, upgraded home. But you have to realize, if that's going to cost you an extra $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, there is a trade-off. That's $30,000, $40,000 you're not going to have for tuition or for camp, or for the vacations, or whatever is important to you. it may mean you need a second job. So that may be your trade-off. That yes, we're going to live in a large, luxurious home, but we're going to be under more financial stress to have to take the second job. Each one is perfectly fine. It's up to each couple to decide what their trade-offs are. You can spend $50,000 when you're a young couple, YOLOing. You only live once, so we're going to travel the world. But you have to realize that $50,000, if you would invest that in some basic mutual funds, that would be enough to pay for all your kids' future costumes, perhaps. Or maybe that will be the home extension 10 years down the line that you're not going to have. That 50,000 would grow to a few $100,000, which would be enough to do something down the road. It's up to you. It's personal finance. What makes sense to you? But there is a trade-off. Going to 5-star restaurants, that may be very important to you. It's good for your shalom bayis, you feel. It's something that you really enjoy, and it just gets you through the month. But at the same time, you could also be saving up all of those very expensive meals, and then 20 years down the line, you take your whole family on it for that once-in-a-lifetime Sukkot and Eretz Yisrael. That's going to cost you $100,000. These are all fine. It's all fine, but there are trade-offs. I'd like to mention one of the most interesting trade-offs that I've come across unfolded over many years. When I was in elementary school, the secular studies teachers were a varied bunch. It was not easy to teach us after a day of yeshiva. We only started secular studies at 3:30. They had a very strong secular studies program. This is yeshiva in Brooklyn. But at the same time, it wasn't easy to find teachers that were able to put up with our pent-up energy, and to put it mildly. So there was one person, a Frum gentleman, middle-aged at the time, about my father's age. I was 8, 9, 10, whatever. So he was in his 40s, 50s. The rumor had it that he was a very cultured fellow, and he had a degree in chemistry, supposedly. The rumor went among the kids, but he was working a second job, so he had money to support his kids in Kyle. That was what went around. So I didn't know if it was true. I wasn't thinking about Kyle. I didn't know much about Kyle. About 15 years later, I was in Beis Meshkavaya, and I bumped into a fellow who was a little older than I was, and he had the same name as this teacher. And it turned out that the rumor was true, that the father, who was our teacher, he had a solid income, more than enough to pay the family's bills, but he also wanted to have money so that he could marry off his children and they would be able to afford to stay in Kail. So I was seeing the product of it, the product of that B'sirus Nefesh that this father had, and the foresight he had, and the discipline he had. After a long day at work, he would come to educate us in different science subjects. He was a soft-spoken man, a real gentleman, but he was doing what worked for his family and what worked for his family's ruchnius. And I happen to live near the children, and I see my former teacher. He's now an elderly gentleman, and it's just fascinating to have the rear view mirror vision view that he made that trade-off, and he got, I'm sure he gets tremendous nachas. I see his anecdote around, and I've been to his great grandchildren's brisim and kiddushim. And this was an amazing trade-off that he made decades ago, where he wanted that extra kemach so he could generate extra Torah for his family. That was an amazing trade-off that he made, and it's inspirational and something that really is eye-opening. Another tachlis takeaway, which is something that really needs to be expanded on, is that there could be a lot of value to having at least one member of the household, one spouse typically, who is able to be attentive to managing the budget, especially the shopping. There's an old saying that a good balabust is a halba parnasa. If you have a housewife that knows what she's doing and is attentive and tichtig, as they say, that's worth a lot of money. And that's something that I see all the time, that a lot of people underestimate the tremendous value that budgeting can have, and even just things like I mentioned, giving haircuts and going to sales and just not wasting and being able to not hire professionals for everything because the house just runs well. There's a tremendous value there. And that's something that, to a large extent, the move to dual income, some of that is economic, but a lot of that is just a matter of choice, which, like I said, that's perfectly fine. Every person should be able to choose what they prefer. If you prefer to hire people to cook for you and to clean for you and to cut your children's hair, et cetera, that's perfectly fine. But on the other hand, there is a big economical trade-off there as well that is often underestimated. A final point, which is a bit in the hashkafic realm, but very, very relevant to this conversation about how much money does a Frum family need, and the need to make sure that your expenses don't exceed your income. So a lot of people totally misconstrue the very famous Chazal that that Hashem assigns us a budget on Rosh Hashanah to last for the rest of the Jewish year. And some people take that to mean that Hashem is giving me my budget, and therefore it doesn't matter what I spend. So therefore I don't have to push myself to earn more money, and I don't have to be careful in how I spend my money because Hashem gave me my budget. So it doesn't matter. Now, this drives me a little bit nuts, because if you just learn Rashi's explanation, it is very clear that the Gemara is saying the exact opposite, that once you get beyond the realm of spending money on Shabbos, Yontif, and money to educate your sons in Torah, the Gemara is saying the exact opposite, that you need to manage your budget because you have a capped income for the year and you're going to run out of money. So this is really a total perversion of the advice the Gemara is giving you. The Gemara is telling you that you do need to live with a cheshbon. Hashem expects you to live with a cheshbon. The fact that Hashem is giving us our parnasa does not mean He's giving us license to overindulge or to be lazy about managing our affairs. So that is something that really caps this conversation. How much money does a Frum family need is something that's very variable. There are trade-offs, but we shouldn't fool ourselves. Of course, Hashem is above it all. Hashem could give us endless money, but that does not mean that we don't have an obligation to try to work out all the trade-offs required to live within what seems to be a derech hateva way of making things work. And then, of course, Hashem throws nisim our way because it's very difficult and things happen. So that is what may seem to be a cop-out answer. I do want to give you some numbers just so you do have some perspective, and this really will lay the groundwork for the next episode, where I want to discuss, again, tachlis, how do people do it? Everyone does it differently, but let's try to explore how do people do it, and what can we learn from the different ways that different Frum families take to make their income and expenses match up. And that could also be useful in our planning when we're trying to do some kind of reasonable, responsible hishtadlus to make sure that we're living within our means. How do we go about doing so? So there are a number of data is very hard to come by. This is improving a little bit. There are some efforts to try to improve the access and accuracy of the data on how much money Frum people are earning, how much they're spending, where the money's going, et cetera, so that we could try to improve things. The Pew Institute of Research, in their 2021 numbers, so they put the median household income for Orthodox Jews in America at $100,000. And about 16% are earning $200,000 or more. And on the other spectrum, you have 25% earning less than $50,000. This is interesting because in the context of America, again, it's a higher income on average than the rest of American adults. It clearly indicates that people are not rolling in it. It's not like everyone is making fortunes of money, which begs the question, so how do people do it? We see these luxury boutiques are jammed, and the Pesach program seems to fill up, and many people are driving high-end cars and buying high-end foods. And like we discussed, tuition bills alone could be 20, 30, 40, 50,000 or more. If people are earning $100,000, $150,000, and then you're paying your taxes and you're giving Meiser and you're paying tuition and you have your housing bills. So bottom line, how are people doing it? I believe the Pew numbers are low, even though they're a professional operation. There are more informal surveys which put median Frum income at $150,000 to $200,000, which I personally think resonates. And I do have theories about why Pew's numbers are lower. There's also very well known. The Census Bureau has certain Frum communities median incomes at $50,000 or less, and that's something that has ignited a lot of controversy. And frankly, I think that data is being misunderstood. It's very nitty gritty, and I'm still working on it. But again, it just doesn't add up. Again, tuition bills alone means that people are not living on that little money. So bottom line, whether the median is 100,000 or 150,000 or 200,000, that means 50% of people are earning less than that. 50% of people are earning more than that. It's very clear that the vast majority of Orthodox families are not earning gargantuan sums. So bottom line, how do people do it? The costs are very high. And as disciplined and as fiscally careful as you run your household, the costs are very, very high for people that have 5, 8, 10 kids. So how are people doing it? Be'ez Hashem, we're going to revisit that. We're going to try to address that question in the next episode. If you have any comments or questions about these topics, please reach out to me via geldguy.com. You can send me an email over there. Subscribe to the newsletter. The newsletter, in addition to having my Strokes of Brilliance come to you every Monday, where we try to give you a very tachlis topic that you can apply right away. It also will contain show notes and summaries of the podcast and any other news that we think is useful and pertinent. So you can just subscribe via the website, and I hope you keep listening. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Parnasa Podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with your family and friends. Visit geldguy.com to send me your questions, comments, or feedback. Be'ez Hashem, I respond to each email personally. geldguy.com is also where you can read hundreds of exclusive Parnasa articles and subscribe to my free weekly newsletter with new Parnasa insights and updates. Please remember that building wealth is not about how much you earn, but how much you save and invest. And finally, in the beautiful words of Micha, Perek Vav, Higelcha Adam Ma Toiv U'Mashem Darish Mecha Ki Aseis Mishpat V'Ahavas Chesed V'Atznei Aleches T'Malikecha.